Number two, cornfield fox go-kart ride. What does that mean? I love this story. When I was 4, I think, and my brother was 6, the house I lived in until I was 10 was surrounded on all sides by cornfields. Cornfields across the street, cornfields to the right of us, cornfields behind us, and then I think 8 little houses, and then more cornfields. We were, I think, 4 or 5 miles outside of the downtown of Zionsville, which is a little town outside of Indianapolis, northwest corner of Indianapolis, outside of the ring. And my parents moved there from Pennsylvania shortly before I was born because the price is cheaper. Anyway, I won't go into that detail. But anyway, I grew up for my first 10 years in this little ranch house, surrounded on almost all sides by a cornfield. And we had some neighbors, and I think of those 8 little houses, 3 of them had children in them. Maybe 4. We had a neighbor next door named Brian that we hung out with a little bit. Then he moved away, and Neil, who I guess I've known my whole life. I haven't really talked to him in the last 20 years very much, but we were very close friends growing up. And then the Davidsons lived at the end of this row of houses. So we would walk up and down the road a lot to reach them. I have lots of childhood memories of walking up and down the road, and there was a train trestle that we'd sometimes walk to with their mom, and it was really exciting to go over a bridge that went over a drainage ditch. So just give you a picture of what, Indiana childhood, cornfields in every direction, drainage ditch along the road that the kids would occasionally drag race on because this was outside of town. And I think the Davidsons were actually a farmer family, but the rest of us weren't. We were just people living in these houses surrounded by cornfields. And as I said, I think yesterday in my story about the people behind the wall and going to the compound, which interestingly enough, I went to a morning meditation this morning, and one of the guys there was a writer, and he talked about how the world was created by 13 archetypes, and that's why, King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table is 13, and Jesus and the Apostles are 13, and there's countless other more esoteric groupings of 13 archetypes. That's why some people argue that the 12 signs of the zodiac should include or Scelpheus, so there could be 13. Anyway, sometimes there's 12, sometimes there's 13, but so that's when I was talking about the people in the compound. So this is around the same age. I'm 4 years old. I'm generally confused by the world and have a bit of a... Well, I didn't have many memories from my childhood for a while. Somebody just commented on how childhood memories roar through my mind the older I get. I didn't have a lot of childhood memories when I was younger. I only had negative childhood memories, so I didn't remember anything from my childhood because I didn't like them. I didn't like the memories. And then I did a lot of work of forgiveness and opening and stuff and was able to remember a lot more of just random, neutral childhood memories and then happy ones. And this one is kind of a happy memory for me, but it's similar on the line of the talking to the people through the wall and sticking the key in the wall to try to exit the world because I slipped into another dimension. Now, I was walking with my brother. We decided... even though we spent a lot of time in the backyards behind our houses because there was a space behind all the houses that went all the way to the next road at the end of the little row of houses, which had then more cornfields after it. And then we'd walk along the road. So we would move up and down this strip often, even in that young age and throughout our childhood. But again, I think I was 4, my brother was 6, and it was summer. And we decided to go into the cornfield to have an adventure. And again, throughout my childhood, we would often go into the cornfields when the corn was cut down or when it was tall. And there were little interstitial forests that bordered all of the cornfields. And that felt really exciting to have trees. And there'd be vines that we would go underneath and climb around. And there would be little magical forts. But even that, I think, all came later. This was... brothers, me and my brother. And brothers, when you're a little kid, well, actually brothers, throughout your childhood, you have this magical bond with them because they're your playmate. They're your eternal playmate that you're always playing with. So me and my brother, at this age, I was named Nicky, and my brother was named Gooby. It's so funny to say. Nicky and Gooby decided to, I don't remember the decision, but we ended up walking out into the cornfield and walking deep into the cornfield. And we never felt we were lost. So the frame story to this is we go into the cornfield and have an adventure, which I will detail in a moment. And my mother goes looking for us and can't find us and has a panic attack. And I believe my father was at work And my sister was just a tiny baby, I think, like just born, a year old. Um, and she called the cops. My dad came home from work, and there were like helicopters and ambulances. And me and my brother were just having an adventure. We weren't frightened. We weren't lost. We knew exactly where we were. We walked deep into the cornfield, and then we continued along the direction that we would go to get to the other road. Now, it was summer, and the cornfields, how tall are they? 5 feet tall? Maybe 5 feet tall, but both of us are like 2 and 3 feet tall. We're kids. We're little kids. So the corn is towering above us. We're in the redwoods for all we're concerned. You know, we can't see the sky very well, and the corn leaves are like little razors, and you have to be careful about it cutting you, and it kind of makes your skin itchy. And it's hot. It's humid. It's an Indiana summer. It's humid as hell. It's just, but again, this isn't a problem because we're little kids, and it's fine. Everything is just fine when you're a little kid. You cry about it and then you're over it. So we're in adventure mode, so it's all exciting, and we're walking through the dark, thick green of commercial agriculture. Somewhere along the journey, I remember meeting a fox. There was a drainage ditch we encountered that I think became larger and led into the place where the bridge went over the road, if I remember correctly. And we kind of climbed down into it. And in my memory, my experience of climbing down into it was we met a fox, both my brother and I. And he had a go-kart. We were really into go-karts at that point because the neighbors at the end of the row of houses had a go-kart, and we really wanted a go-kart. They were loud, and they were fast, and they were exciting. And they were child-sized cars. And the fox was a cartoon fox, like the fox from the myths and the fables. And he invited us to go for a ride in his go-kart. And we zoomed down through the valley, which was then a very large thing that opened into a meadow-type valley where all these animals lived. Turtles and frogs and birds. But they were all anthropomorphized. They were all people. And I just remember it was very friendly. It was like visiting a little town. There were little houses. Everybody waved at us and said hello. And again, there wasn't much of a important feeling of something to do. It was just like arriving at a place where everyone knows you and they're all glad to see you. So you're just like, hi, everybody. And it's just like an open-hearted friendliness. If you ever have that experience where there's no thinking or wondering or explaining, just an open-hearted friendliness. Except that we were little kids riding in a go-kart driven by a fox, and all the animals were people, animals. Of course, as a kid, fables and television shows, cartoons, Peter Rabbit, Frog, Toad Hollow, stuff like that. It was all informed by that, and I assume that these were the same kind of beings that I experienced in the compound, and the same kind of beings that I saw through the wall, but they were just incarnate in a way. Hi, Guy. They were just incarnate in a way that were available to me. And everything I've learned about fairies since then, or even sliding into other dimensions, what people might call angels or gods, and these are actually different things, but there's still different dimensions one can slide into and interact with beings. That they take a shape you can deal with. And when you slide into another dimension, it can be something very small, like a shadow or a rock or a trunk. But when you pass through it, and a lot of people are familiar with this concept from Harry Potter, that whole idea that they would walk through a kind of a column divider thing and then be on a different platform. That a lot of these dimensional shifts, they don't appear to be doors unless you can see them as doors. So I guess we just saw a door. Again, my brother has no memory of this, but it was just seemed like a very normal thing to me when I was a child, that we just like went, I don't know, passed through a shadow, turned to the side, and then all of a sudden we were in a very large place. And that generally when you slide into these other dimensions, time moves very differently. So much like dreaming, that when they scientifically say when you have REM sleep and you have dreams, that you can have this huge elaborate story that your brain stitches together into a narrative, although it's sometimes not a narrative at all. It's just non sequitur after non sequitur that your brain tries to make sense of, which is when you try to recount it, you're like, that was so weird. But you can have huge amounts of events that happen in a split second in this reality version of time. But in your dream, huge amounts of things can happen in a split second, moments. So the same thing kind of happens when people fall into the realm of fairy, what people might call fairy or other dimensions of gods and angels. Time is entirely different. And the further you go in, the bigger it gets and the slower time goes out here. We weren't there very long. I do remember that. It was this friendly, hello, oh, it's so nice to see you. Oh, hi, Mr. Rabbit. Hi, Mr. Skunk. Yeah, Guy, will be saved on Facebook and will be posted, and you can always just come back and look at it whenever you want. And then we left. Like the fox, or maybe a turtle drove us out of there. Maybe it was a turtle that drove us out of there. And, later throughout my childhood, I would always like catch turtles and talk to them and make little houses for them and frogs and stuff. But they wouldn't be healthy and they wouldn't be happy, so I'd always let them go. After a few days, a week or something. I never had them very long. But these were like my friends when I was a kid, of course. The wild animals, not the pets as much. Pets were a little weird for me until I got a chicken, which was a farm meat bird, but became my friend. I don't know if that's an interesting story I'll tell or not, but I had a chicken that I thought was a parrot. Or I treated like a parrot, and I was a pirate. Childhood. Imagination. Fantasy. So we left there. Somebody drove us out, and we continued walking through the cornfield. And I think it was shortly after that we got to the edge of the cornfield, and there was a road. And right across the road was that big white house. And I think we had driven by it before, but never been in there. And in that strange innocence that happens as children, we walked up on the porch and knocked on the door. And a woman answered. And she invited us in, and she said, "Are you boys lost?" And we're like, "No, we're fine, but we're really thirsty." We'd been talking about how thirsty we were. And she said, "Oh, I'll give you a glass of water. Would you like to call your mother?" And we were like, "No, we're fine." And I don't think we knew the number. Maybe my brother remembered the number, but I certainly didn't at that age. And we drank a glass of water. I remember the quality of the light coming through the windows. And again, it was a very hot day, and it was very refreshing to drink a glass of water. Let's be a few more minutes. But you can sit next to me while I tell the story. And we said thank you to this lady, who I don't know if we ever met again. But I do remember that we drank a glass of water, and then we went back into the cornfield. We chose not to go back along the road or behind the houses. We got back into the cornfield and walked again deep through the cornfield back to where our house was. And when we got back to where the house was, we came out through the cornfield just with this excited thing that, wow, we've just had a really great adventure and now we're home. Which, if you've ever had a great adventure and then you return home, you've had a really great adventure and you're excited about the great adventure, and then you're excited that you're home and you get to tell somebody about the great adventure. But unfortunately, that's not the energy we came back to. We came back to police and sirens and flashing lights and panicking mother crying, saying, oh God, I can't, I'm just so glad you're safe. And we were like, oh. We were, the whole time we were totally ignorant to the fact that we had caused all this hullabaloo and stress. And it's one of the only memories that I have of my life where I slipped into the realm of fairy like that. So dramatically, even though it wasn't dramatic, it was just totally, that was one of the things that was so great about it. It was totally mundane. But, it didn't require any meditation or LSD. It didn't require any trying. It was just the innocence of a child sliding into the animal kingdom as your friends, as your equals, or their spirit bodies. I mean, it's hard to explain in any way. It sounds silly to explain. But I know a lot of people who have experienced such things, who have just been able to hang out in other dimensions with other beings. And there's lots of cultures like the Icelanders and the Irish who it's just a normal part of society to believe in these things. And I have encountered spirits other times in my life, though not very frequently. And this lover of mine who died a month ago, Robert, when I lived with him, I was always really blown away because sometimes we'd be hanging out talking and then his eyes would go all far away and I could tell he had just disappeared, and then he'd come back and he'd be like, oh, sorry, I was talking to the fairies. He just would see the fairies all the time. So I don't know, do you have any experiences where you just saw the fairies or you slid into another world? Do you remember memories from childhood or even adulthood? Because I suppose some people can become softer and more innocent as they get older too. Somebody earlier mentioned that their childhood memories came back the older they get, roar through their head. I wouldn't say memories roar through my head, but I have quite a few times in my life had experiences where I'm like cutting carrots and all of a sudden I'm 100% back on a street corner at night in Amsterdam for less than a second. But like full memory recall of all the senses and visions. I'm just like, what the fuck was that? I wondered if, is that an acid flashback? Is that like a stroke? Is it just a gift? Is it the brain reorganizing things? And I definitely know that I've had, maybe that's another story I'll launch into another time. But yeah, if any of you end up watching this and you've had any memories in your life where you've slid into other dimensions and it just felt very mundane, I guess with or without inebriants, it'd be nice if you tell us a story about it, either in words or video. I think I'm going to do an interview with my friend now. We'll see how that goes. I'm not going to do it live, but I'll post it later.